Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Welcome back to another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. You're getting a solo episode with me today about accessory dwelling units and how long I've been involved with them. It may surprise you because it goes back to my teenage years and how my dad did real estate. So let's go ADU, DADU, it's time. This is episode 233 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with myself. This is a solo episode that I mixed in, and it's not because we're in a shortfall. We're actually 14 or 15 episodes ahead, but I've been doing a bunch of due diligence and research on topics that I've been interested in, and ADUs and DADUs keep coming up over and over as a potential solution to the affordable housing crisis and as just great options for homeowners. And what I realized is that I have a long history with accessory dwelling units, really with detached accessory dwelling units, which is a DADU. So I decided to just mix in a quick episode with myself, the solo, so it gives you a little bit more background of my history and also touches on a topic that I feel is going to be more and more important as we progress through the years. And it gives a lot of people an alternative option of something that they could do on their own property. Maybe they didn't think they could. Maybe there's something there already, but it's a great option. So let's get into it. I actually figured out recently how to use ChatGPT to the purposes that suit me. So I've run this up just so if you don't know the difference between accessory dwelling unit and detached accessory dwelling unit, it is actually pretty simple. The D is the important part, which stands for detached. So ADUs can be attached or located within the primary residence. That can be a basement apartment, converted garage, home additions. The DADU is completely detached from the primary home, which is why it's called a detached accessory dwelling unit, backyard cottages, standalone structures, which are very much what I grew up in, and you'll hear all about it. The size and design differs for a lot. ADUs may have size restrictions based on local zoning codes, but are often more constrained due to their integration with the main house. The DADU has more design flexibility since they're independent structures, but they do have to comply with lot coverage and height regulations. And in the Northeast where I am, we don't see a ton of them, but the West Coast seems to be progressive. And if you really want to learn more than you're going to learn from me about ADUs, don't forget that we have a full ADU episode with that ADU guy, Derek Sherrill. That's episode 53. So you can go to our website, zenandtheartofrealestateinvesting.com, go up to the search bar, type in 53 or Derek's name, Derek Sherrill. He's a goat on ADUs, and he'll tell you all about it there. But we're going to get into it with my history because this is a personal episode and another way that you can do a deeper dive after 233 episodes about my history. So let's finish off on the differences between ADU and DADU. ADUs often share walls and utilities with the main house, providing less privacy. DADUs offer more separation and privacy, making them ideal for rentals, ding ding, or extended family housing, which is what I lived in, the extended family housing part, because my dad never charged me rent for living there. Construction and costs, ADUs less expensive to build since they use existing space or share infrastructure with the main home. DADU typically costs more due to the need for independent utilities, foundations, and access pathways. Those are actually really good points, and Derek goes into it in our episode, which is old. We're going to need to get him back on. Derek, if you're listening, let's go. And then number 5, the zoning and permits. Both are subject to local zoning laws, but the DADU often has stricter regulations regarding placement, lot size, and setbacks because it's a separate structure. So you're going to need to understand, one, is your township amenable to ADUs? And then you need to understand the setback rules. where you need roads, where you're going to do with your utilities, and anything else that you need to know. So that's just kind of a basics on the difference between the two as I talk about them. But it's funny because I've been doing this podcast for so long and I've been investing for so long, but it's not something that I really, I guess, figured out that I had lived in so many detached accessory dwelling units. So, as usual, my dad was extremely ahead of the curve. And as I went back and thought about it, the first house that I remember living in with my dad was in Bedford, New York, when I was very young after my parents got divorced. I was maybe 4 or 5. And I remember us having multiple tenants. So we had an ADU at this house because it was attached. I remember that there was a door off the kitchen where you could enter into the other unit. And I think my dad bought it that way and then maybe customized it. But he continued this throughout his entire life. And I grew up as a teenager living like this for a variety of reasons, which we'll get into, and which is, something that may work for you and has worked for me now in a full circle moment where I live now. So in that Bedford house, I just remember there being randoms attached to the house. I don't think we shared a kitchen because I didn't see them that much, but I do remember the door opening from time to time. So it was interesting at that time to understand that we had tenants that were sharing at least one wall. I was too young to really make heads or tails of it, but it again is start of the osmosis process of what my dad would do in terms of buying houses, seeing what you could do. And he was a fan of multiple structures. The more structures, the better. And I think I'm trying to take that along with me now. And I've had ADUs in the past as well. Just actually forgot about one that I had. So, and that's a funny thing about investing for so long. I've been reading articles about my genealogy and finding out that my great grandfather was in real estate. So I expect to do some more episodes on how I figured all this stuff out. But that Bedford house was the first start when I was younger. Then we moved to a really big house that my dad built or renovated. And this was the one that my siblings and I still talk about because he got it to a level where we had everything that we had ever wanted as kids. And then he told us we were selling. And to quell our upset, he told us how much he was making. And that was the first time I understood what flipping houses was. So he was really I guess, a live-in house flipper, because we would do a lot of the work and he would build a lot of different structures. So at this second house, which was in Mount Kisco that I remember, I know there was a full detached accessory dwelling unit that we had a tenant at the bottom of a small hill, and that was rented. Before it was rented, we used to go and play in there. But I remember that was something that my dad was always doing. So, this is probably, the first one was maybe 1975, and the second one is maybe 1980. So again, this is a long time ago. My dad, again, 43 years ago, was already figuring out the ADU and DADU prophecy and was working it. That tenancies, I'm sure they didn't make too much money in the day, but any money coming in was good. And it was another tenancy for my dad, who of course was, a rental property owner and taught me how to be a landlord from the earliest time that I remember. So, from that house, I remember was a straight rental, but we were still young at that time, my stepbrothers and my sister. So as we started to get older, he started to see a different use for the ADU or DADU. And as we moved to another house, it was also in Mount Kisco, after we sold that one, we did it again. And I don't remember, I think there was a garage there originally, and I think there maybe have just been a structure on top, or he could have built a structure on top. But when we were younger, my stepbrother and I lived downstairs in the basement. The house was built over a rock, so we had a huge rock in our room. I was only there on weekends. But then as we started to get into about 14, that extra DADU that was outside over the garage became usable. First, he finished it without a bathroom because I think the town wouldn't let him have a bathroom at that time. Obviously, there was a plumbing or septic. I don't remember at the time. I was too young to be getting into whether we had town sewer, and it was on top of a hill, so I'm just assuming we had septic. But we started to use it as kind of a play area. I remember we had like a couple little basketball hoops in there. And then eventually he really finished it off. We still didn't have a bathroom. So apologies for anyone who thinks this is weird, but we at 14 and 15, my brother and I started sleeping out in that DADU, and there was no bathroom, and we were lazy. So if we had to go number one, it was just stand on the deck and pee off of the balcony, which my dad didn't like, which is eventually why he put a bathroom and spent the money to put it in there. But that was what we were doing. We were 14 or 15. We thought it was the coolest thing ever. We didn't have to sleep in the house with our parents. It was right across the driveway. It gave us a sense of independence, and I think the independence part is important. We were able to do what we wanted out there. They weren't going to know what time we went to bed. We would just lock the door, pretend to turn off the lights, and then turn them back on later, play basketball all night, play video games, hang out, watch movies. And it was really a good thing for us to learn at that age. And we continued that into the summers. We always went out to Long Island in the summers, and we realized quickly that he was going to do it again. And the houses that we stayed in and owned in the Sag Harbor area and also in Bridgehampton when we moved one summer, and that's a whole other story, they had a DADU as well. And the main house that we lived in for years, from maybe 16 till we were 22 or more in Sag Harbor, it had two regular size houses. We really weren't even in, it's crazy to call it a DADU because it might have actually been bigger than my dad's regular house. So there was a house down at the bottom. That's where my dad and my stepmom and my sister stayed. She was still young at the time. And then there was a dadu further up towards the road. And the dadu was big. It was two bedrooms and a loft. And then at one time when we had a mother's helper for the summer, we put another bedroom in the side. So we really had 4 sleeping areas in there, a kitchen that we didn't use because we just went to the deli every day after work. But so we really lived completely independently in the summers on the same property. And at one point we asked my dad, like, why are you doing this? And he said, you would keep us up all night. You guys stay up all night. We were young. We were going out to clubs. We all had fake IDs. So we spent a bunch of time out. We'd get home 3, 4 in the morning, and he didn't want to be woken up. I don't think he realized that, when you're less than 20 and you come home at 4 in the morning, you're going to wake everybody on the property up either way, but it happens. But again, this detached accessory dwelling unit was such an important step for us to feel like, hey, we're almost practicing for college at the time, being able to live freely in the summer, but also my dad knowing that if he wanted to just stay up and look out the window, he could. I don't think any of us cared or even paid attention if he was or was not, but that was just part of, how we grew up. And I think that I wanted to provide that for my kids, a little hybrid of independence. I just didn't do it until a little bit later when I moved where I live now. There was a summer where my dad, again, this is a real estate investor story. One summer at this house that I'm talking about, someone drove down the driveway and we didn't know what was going on. And my dad said, this is very, very early in the summer, probably in May, because we were still there and we were out early for a weekend. And he said, we're going to go to a different house for the summer. We're like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. Why would we leave for the summer? And it was because Billy Joel wanted to rent our house the summer that he was making that album in Russia. So he and Christy Brinkley rented the house for the summer. We moved out to another house, and lo and behold, we moved to Bridgehampton, and there he found a rental for the summer with another detached accessory dwelling unit. And this one wasn't as nice. We call it the Bob Brophy summer because that's who owned the DADU that we lived in, and he owned the house that we rented for that summer. And my dad and my stepmom had a regular house with a pool, and we had just a tiny shack for my 2 stepbrothers and I going out every night. My stepbrother Eric lived in the living room with the bed. My stepbrother Nick lived up in a loft that was not a loft. It was enough to fit a bed in, which he did. And somehow I finagled the only bedroom. Our shower was a disaster. Our kitchen was a disaster. And we loved every single minute of it. And that's really detached accessory dwelling unit living when you're younger. Again, it's a hybrid independence, freedom, but also a little bit of security because you knew, when you don't have food, you could just go in the sliding door, take whatever food you want, steal it from your parents, and leave them with no peanut butter and jelly, which would get you in trouble later. But if anybody knows me, they know I lived a kind of interesting childhood. Parents of divorce, and neither of my parents were disciplinarians. So I grew up not having any rules, which helped me dramatically. I also never really did too much bad. I did stay out late, but I think over the grand scheme of things, for someone with little rules, I violated very little because I didn't have a curfew. So I could come home early, I could come home late. And I think by them giving us the independence, it probably gave them a little independence. And I know for myself being a parent, as my kids got older, you eventually get more comfortable knowing that they're living on site. But yeah, you can still peep through the window to see what time they get home. So you still stay up, you still stay up late as a parent until you get comfortable with the age and what they're doing, which I have gotten and did over the time. I hope you're enjoying this solo episode on accessory dwelling units, but if you want to know everything about ADUs, go back, queue up episode 53 with Derek Sherrill, everything you need to know about ADUs. It's exactly what I said. He is the guru. You can find more about him at thataduguy.com, and that actually includes a buildable plan for an ADU. There are a lot of jurisdictions that are changing. This is time to keep on top of it. Let's get back to my solo show. So those Long Island DADUs were really important for us because those were summers where we worked the entire summer and we worked hard. We either worked at a beach club all day, lugging mats, lugging chairs, rolling tennis courts, or my brother worked construction, but my older stepbrother and my younger stepbrother both lifeguarding for a while. We did typical summer activities, but for all the fun that we had in the summer, we worked hard. And we always did. After that, we worked at day camps, which was a better slot. And remember, it just makes it easier. The jobs that I worked at the beach club was sometimes I'd have to be up 5:30 to roll the tennis courts to make sure that people came in and everything would be ready. And when we were pulling mats out, it would have to be ready, had to get the chairs ready. So these were early morning jobs. And, my dad in the summer did not have to get up and go to an early morning job. He was on time freedom at that point. His law office was not out in Long Island. So when he was out there, he didn't want to get woken up at 6 a.m. while we were going to our jobs. So, it's a parent choice. It's a child choice. It's also, of course, a money thing. And I've never been shy to say that I was very fortunate. My dad worked very hard to provide these opportunities for me. And there hasn't been one day, except when I was a young brat, that I haven't appreciated it. Because my dad didn't come from money. He built up real estate portfolio on his own by figuring out what to buy, how to buy it, and also being savvy in business and knowing how to leverage. And part of that was accessory dwelling units, detached accessory dwelling units, pulling rent, rental properties. And these were all things, as I said before, that I was absorbing through osmosis as I got older and started to understand tenancies and say, oh, wow, it is nice to have something on site where somebody's paying you rent. And again, nowadays, a lot of those properties we probably would have done short-term rentals at because they had a separate drive and you could easily drive into them, or there was separate parking, and that would be a way to upgrade. So a lot of people who have the capability to have a garage unit, ADU, DADU, you can use those to upgrade. You can get nice steady rent and no transients by having one long-term tenant, or you can go in the other direction and do short-term rental or mid-term rental if it's allowed in your area for the type of property you have. Again, those are much better opportunities in areas where there are STR regulations, because most of the places where there are STR regulations, where it's 30-day stay or more, you usually can do short-term rental as long as you live on property. So if you own the main house and you have a back house and STR is allowed, you can usually skirt the areas even where they have regulations. Not all of them, so don't go buy things without checking. but that is my understanding. And that's how it is for a lot of places where if you're on site and the homeowner, they do allow it. Again, it could be a permit issue, depending on how many they're issuing. And from there, I started eventually to figure out that I would end up with my own accessory dwelling units, either for comfort use or for potential guests. I'm not a big guests in my house person. So as I got older, it was much smarter for me to have a guest house. So in Sarasota, when I was living there, where I lived for 7 years, my ex and I, we built a guest house. We had a big property. The lot was large, and it was basically a really nice house with a huge lot. And I can't believe, actually thinking of it now, that the foresight was there to do what we did, because I wasn't doing this really full time at the time. I was still an attorney then. I had a bunch of properties, but I didn't think of myself as a real estate investor. But we built a pool in the middle, similar to what I had seen at that Bob Brophy summer. And then we built a 3-car garage because we didn't have a garage. And since we were doing it, we put a really, really nice unit on top, which a couple of my friends had stayed in over the years. And so that one we built with a generator because it was Florida. We didn't have a generator in our main house, but we put the generator out there in case the power ever went out. We could always just commute across the pool to the back house and then use the generator back there. It was wildly successful. The story of the sale of that house is a disaster. It's been told on other podcasts, but that was a great house, probably my favorite house that I personally lived in as an adult. And the cost was probably too much, but they did a fantastic job. So it really matched the main house. And again, my kids were little at the time. They were both below 4. So it's not like they were getting a free run of independence to use that guest house. But, if it was still there, they would have. Because as we moved to houses, as my kids got older, I had houses that either had basements or attics or separate floors. And for teenagers, that's a much better fit, and a much better fit for parents than living right next to your bedroom. So that's why you see so many kids crunching themselves into attic or basement, which my son did for many years in the basement. But then, so the house that I live in now, I bought specifically for this reason. When I was buying this house in Mendham, New Jersey, about 3.5 years ago, I saw that they had a unit over the garage, and without thinking, it brought back all of my childhood memories and how smart my dad was. And I just bid up to get the house. I wasn't really worried about it. I knew it had way more long-term value because they weren't really counting the 1-bed and 1-bath unit that's over my garage. I have a 2-car detached garage, and on top there is a detached accessory dwelling unit with a full bath. And when I moved in, I had 30 days to renovate, and I added a dishwasher back there and a full kitchen except for a stove. So my daughter actually lived out there for 2 years, used a hot plate, came in the house to do laundry, and came in the house to do bake or more stuff on the oven. And that was a really great time to have her close by. I'm sure I was annoying because I could look out the window, but it was nice to have her nearby. And I started to think back of how that must have been nice for my dad. Not nice when I would come home at 4 a.m. with my brothers and just be extremely loud with all of our friends, but nice to know that he was giving us the independence, and I felt the same. And so I still I'm still living here, and both my kids currently live out of the house, but I'm going to renovate it even more because at some point they could always come back. Could I use it as a short-term rental? Yes, but because I'm not a big people person, it's a little uncomfortable for me to have to interact with someone. So that's probably a hard no. If I didn't think my kids were ever going to go back, it may become the podcast studio. So you won't see me in this office. But I think for now, I'm going to redo it, keep it as a unit, guest unit, and see what happens there. And again, remember, as regulation changes and people become more familiar with ADU and DADU, it's a huge selling point for when I sell. For me, my main house is a 4-bed, 2-bath, and then I have an extra 1 out there. But, it traded at really what a 4-2 is or less. So, I've always been good at buying houses, and my dad was always good at buying houses, and he was good at creating alternative environments where he could make money. And I realize now, all these years later, I'm really trying to do the same thing. So I think for myself moving forward, if I'm buying houses, I really want to buy houses that have the opportunity to put in an ADU, because no matter how old I get or how old my kids get, I always want them to have a place to come back to, even if they're just visiting with their families later on. And the ideal thing would be for my sister and I to have a compound together with multiple houses, where our stepbrothers can come or our family can come. And I feel like if you look at the overall, trend of the loneliness part of the world and the uptick in intergenerational familial living, these are great opportunities. Mother-daughters serve a purpose, but those are generally kind of just a separate entrance to a bedroom and bath. The ADU is just a little bit bigger, and then the DADU is even bigger because you get that separate entrance. Again, more permitting to do that, but more value in that as well long term. And if you listen to Derek Sherrell's episode, again, that's 53, I believe. Let me double check. Yep, 53, Everything You Need to Know About ADUs with Derek Sherrell. He talks about how some people are able to re-permit those or change the lot lines and maybe even sell them separately. And if you listen to Sean DeMartle's episode, you can look that one up. I'm actually going to just look it up right now, because we talk a lot about that on his episode as well. That is episode 85, How to Make Your Real Estate Investing Journey Take Off with Sean DeMartle. He's in San Diego. We talk a lot about what they're doing out there and what the rules are and what they're able to do in terms of building ADUs in the back that are really multifamily ADUs. It's a very interesting thing where they're going to, assess the parking, but they're trying to get more units into these areas. And this is one of the ways. So if you're interested in accessory dwelling units, you want to start with Derek Sherrell, episode 53, listen to Sean DeMartle, episode 85. And then hopefully this has helped you get a little bit of an understanding of me as how long I've been in the game and how long I've been doing these things and learning these things that are now popular, that in 1980 nobody talked about. There was no that ADU guy, or there really wasn't any internet, so there was no way for me to find out things about them. I just thought this was regular and that this is what people did. And my dad was just an extremely smart person. Again, he built his real estate portfolio from scratch by working hard, trading deals, and knowing how to dig underneath rocks and create other economic environments that could turn into cash flow. And again, now, my dad died when I was 33, 53. So 20 years later, I'm still trying to put the things that he taught me into play and bring them to light on this podcast. So I hope you've enjoyed my long history of accessory dwelling units. It's been an interesting ride for me, but I really think the ADU and the DADU are going to be key possibilities for people moving forward. They're especially great for your enjoyability and livability, which a lot of people forget on your primary home, that you should be able to enjoy it as much as possible, hopefully gain appreciation on that asset as well. It's why you need to be an asset hunter. But having an ADU or DADU at your primary residence is an absolute windfall. Could be a gym, could be an office, could be a guest house, could be for your kids as they grow up, could be for your parents if they're coming. You just never know with a family when somebody's going to need that. And if you have that as an extra opportunity, or you have the space to build or do it, you're never going to go down in value by adding more living space legally to your property. Well, thanks for listening to the solo episode. Again, it wasn't because we're in a crunch. We're 14, 15 episodes ahead. So I really appreciate you listening to the podcast. I can't believe we're at episode 233. It's amazing. It's probably the favorite thing that I do besides being a parent. And I hope you're enjoying it. Let's talk ADUs or DADUs more in the future. We'll see you. Thanks for listening to another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing, and for sticking around so you can get a preview of who's coming up on the next episode of this show Episode 234, it's honestly one of my favorites, and it's actually going to give you a lot of insight into the 5-year economic plan and what's coming. My guest is Lauren Seidel Baker. She's an economist at ITR Economics. At ITR, they provide the best economic intelligence to reduce risk and drive practical and profitable business decisions. You are going to want to listen to this show. She's also my favorite because she's an automaton like me, and she said so when I saw her at Bigger Pockets and knew I had to get her on the show. Stay tuned and be there for the next episode with Lauren.